Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nairobi Health Show with Jeff Chilton, who I have cheekily called the King of Shrooms here after reading his bio. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Dave, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
In chatting, getting to know you, and before I read your bio here to everybody, it was fascinating for me to learn that I grew up in British Columbia and moved to the U.S., and you grew up in the U.S. and currently live in British Columbia. So a pretty interesting scenario there.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And of course, I was just born across the border in Washington State, so it wasn't a big jump for me. But yeah, it's very nice. I've enjoyed it up here.
And you're currently living in really one of a paradise on earth, really. Tofino is where a lot of people pay a lot of money to fly into Vancouver Island and see the whales, and you live there.
I do. And actually, I have a 2.5 acre property here that has got old growth trees on it. So some of the trees on my property are 150 feet tall. It would take about 6 people holding arms to get around it. I mean, Beautiful. It's just an amazing area.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been there. I love Vancouver Island. I've been several times, actually. And it's absolutely a beautiful place. And sunny there today.
Oh, we love the sunshine. We don't get a lot of it.
You got to appreciate it when you get it.
Oh, we absolutely do. Yes. Out here on the coast, we get, well, in August, they call it Fogust. And in July, our mean temperature is somewhere around 65, 67. We don't get much of a summer here in terms of temperature. Temperate
coastal climate, but absolutely beautiful. And for those of you listening, let me tell you a little bit about Jeff. He could easily be crowned the king of mushrooms. Since 1973, Jeff has been a leader in the U.S. mushroom industry. He was involved in the research and development of shiitake, oyster, and enoki mushrooms, which resulted in the earliest U.S. fresh shiitake sales in 1978. In the 1980s, he operated a mushroom spawn business, and in 1989, started Nammex, a business that introduced medicinal mushrooms to the U.S. nutritional supplement industry. Nammex was the first to offer a complete line of certified organic mushroom extracts to the U.S. nutritional supplement industry, and their extracts are being used by many supplement companies and are noted for their scientifically proved active compounds and quality. And Jeff, you've been in mushrooms your whole life, it seems like.
Well, you know what? In the Pacific Northwest, we have mushrooms all around us. It's a very wet, rainy climate. In the fall, it's one of the best places in the world to be for wild mushroom hunting. So I went out early as a youngster hunting wild mushrooms. And then in the late 60s, when I was in university in Seattle, my field of study was anthropology, but I also studied some mycology while I was there. So I put together the two studies and actually learned a lot about the use of mushrooms for food, for medicine, and for shamanic purposes. And so that was my field of study back then.
Absolutely fascinating. And I mentioned to you before we started, and I want to bring it up again so anyone listening can hear, that to me, mushrooms are absolutely amazing in the range of what we get, right? So in phytonutrients, for example, we know that mushrooms are absolutely packed with healthy phytonutrients and that mushrooms ought to be part of our diet. But then on the other hand, there's mushrooms that will kill you that you should just never eat. And on the other hand, there's mushrooms that you can take you on a psychedelic trip for the next 4 hours that for some people, they've reported incredible breakthroughs mentally, psychologically. There's research going on currently with mushrooms being used, psilocybin, for example, is an effective treatment for PTSD, depression, anxiety. There's microdosing that many people listening have probably heard about. And before we go any further, let me just state that this information is for informational purposes only.
What do you say? No psychoactive mushrooms were eaten during this particular program, Dave? Is that it?
No psychoactive, although I might act like I have somewhere along the way. I don't know. But no, we're simply having an educational discussion. We're not making recommendations. We're exploring the fascinating world of mushrooms. But again, that range, Jeff, to me, it's crazy, right? As we look at the mushrooms all around the world, from poisonous to spiritually expansive, to a wonderful treat, beside your bacon and eggs on a Saturday, Sunday morning at brunch.
Well, and let me just start there for a second too, because I consider mushrooms to be the forgotten food in North America. The missing dietary link. Mushrooms are a wonderful nutrient-packed food. When I started growing mushrooms commercially on a very large farm in 1973, at that point in time, classical nutritionists stated that mushrooms were great as a garnish, but they had no nutritional value. Can you imagine? And you know why they said that? Because mushrooms are low in calories. That's the only reason. And today you think low cal, that's a good thing. Mushrooms do not have starch as their storage carbohydrate. They have glycogen, interestingly enough. But mushrooms are primarily carbohydrate, and they have really high quality carbohydrates like mannitol and trehalose, which are very slow acting. So they do not hit you like a bomb like starch does. Instead, it's very slow acting. What they give you, they have good quality protein in them, 20 to 40% protein, low in fat, high in fiber. So they're also feeding the microbiome, high in phosphorus, potassium, and 3 B vitamins, B1, 2, and 3, good quantities of B vitamins. So they are really a nutritious food. And I'm always saying to people, put mushrooms into your diet.
Excellent. And you know what? My health certification is with Precision Nutrition, which is one of the top 5 nutritional certifications on the planet. PhD nutritionist running the place, and the certification is difficult to get, and kind of painful, especially if you've been out of school for a long time. And when you get to the part on supplementation and the nutritional qualities of various foods, there was this fascinating afternoon that I was doing my studying and going through. There's kind of a reverse nutritional chapter of how to get certain things. So if your client is low in this, take this. Your client is low in vitamin E, eat carrots, right? So one of those types of trainings, okay? And mushrooms were everywhere. So your client is low, have them eat, dark green leafy vegetables and this and mushrooms. Next topic, clients low, have them eat this, and mushrooms. And as I went through, it was so striking, Jeff, that I actually went over to my wife and I said, you've got to look at this. What do you see? Look at the pattern. And I flipped through page after page after page after page. And by far, mushrooms was the one that covered the most broad categories. So I thought that was really amazing.
Oh yeah, they're really a great food. And we've had one mushroom since, well, way back, and that's been the agaricus mushroom. And the mushroom farm that I worked on did in fact grow 2 million pounds of agaricus mushrooms every year. And well, have you ever been to a mushroom farm, Dave?
I've never been to a mushroom farm.
Yeah, nobody's ever been to a mushroom farm. And the reason is that mushrooms are grown indoors in like large warehouses or very big barns. And so very few people have actually seen it. But the interesting part about mushrooms is they do not sleep. So, I mean, literally they grow and grow. And what that means is that you have to be harvesting them every single day on a commercial mushroom farm. Christmas, New Year's, doesn't matter, because you have crops on a 90-day cycle. So they are, as we put in, let's just say 5 new crops every week, 5 old crops go out on this 90-day cycle. So they are continuing to grow. You have an army of people harvesting. Every single mushroom you've ever eaten has been harvested by hand. Can you imagine? By hand?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really an interesting crop. It's again, it's a very nutritious food, and if people want to get started and they aren't eating mushrooms now, what I always say to them is eat shiitake mushrooms. Can you imagine? I was eating fresh shiitake mushrooms in the 1970s. There was nobody in the United States that was eating fresh shiitake at the time because we were actually growing them then. So for me, while I was at the mushroom farm, it was just a fantastic experience. I loved every hardworking minute of it. I was literally living with mushrooms, millions of them.
Millions of mushrooms. Well, and this part of your bio, explain this to me, that you were involved in the development of shiitake, oyster, and enoki mushrooms. What does that mean?
Well, we had a Japanese scientist at this farm, and he was the director of research and development. Well, they had grown these mushrooms in Japan for years and years and years. In fact, shiitake mushrooms, the Chinese learned how to grow shiitake mushrooms in the 12th century. And agaricus mushrooms didn't even get started until the 18th century in France. So he was there growing shiitake, growing oyster mushrooms, growing enoki mushrooms. So I was involved in that. I was a production manager there, but I was also involved in helping him get these off the ground. So he was growing shiitake traditionally on 3-foot long oak logs that are about 6 inches in diameter. And after 18 months of incubation, they began to produce shiitake mushrooms. And there were enough, and it was designed as sort of a pilot to put fresh shiitake into the market around the Seattle area, which they did. And here's the kicker to it all. The what came back from all these shiitakes was people saying, oh, yeah, the shiitake is a little bit strong flavored, and you know, so it literally flopped. And it was a really good marketing effort to put it in. I mean, it's just like boxes of it right on the shelf next to the agaricus mushrooms, but it did not go in. People weren't ready for shiitake mushrooms. And I think shiitake is the best edible mushroom we've got out there. I love shiitake. In Chinese, it's called shanggu, which means fragrant mushroom. I mean, the odor of a shiitake is amazing.
Okay, interesting. So agaricus, so that's what we would expect to find at our local grocery store.
That's what's called the button mushroom.
The button mushroom, that's the main mushroom. If my wife says, honey, get mushrooms at the grocery store, that's what I'm going to come home with.
Most likely. And remember, too, there are things called the button mushroom. Then there's the cremini. Then there's the portobello. Now, the portobello is a very large, actually mature agaricus mushroom. The button mushroom is a button because it's actually very immature. It hasn't opened up its cap, which means it's got a much longer shelf life. And then the cremini is nothing more than a brown strain of the agaricus mushroom. So all three of those are actually the same species of mushroom.
All agaricus.
Yeah,
now,
all agaricus.
And we know from other crops that there's a huge difference in nutritional value between something that's an early stage, ripened, over ripened. Portobello mushrooms are quite popular in restaurants now. You can get a lot of dishes that include portobello mushroom. So what are the differences nutritionally between those button mushrooms, regular size mushrooms, and portobello mushrooms?
Well, I would say, you know what, really for the mushroom, not a lot of difference there. Okay. There's some people say there's a bit of a flavor difference in terms of the portobello being mature, having a little bit stronger flavor. But what is interesting about your point is that every species of mushroom, so the shiitake, the agaricus, the oyster, will have a different nutritional profile. Could be very significant. I mean, some of them are 20% protein. The agaricus is 35% protein. So very much a lot of differences there. You're still getting the basic benefits, especially from the carbohydrates, which are, again, mannitol. But here's what's interesting is in all mushrooms, there's a compound called a beta-glucan, and it makes up 50% of the cell walls of all mushrooms. And that beta-glucan is what gives mushrooms their medicinal benefits. It is a immunological potentiator. So when we're eating mushrooms, not only are we getting those phytonutrients, but we're also getting these beta glucans that will help us with our immune system.
Interesting. Okay, so immune boosting, other phytonutrients you mentioned earlier. Let's talk practicality here. You've been in mushrooms your whole life. Do you eat mushrooms in some form and with some meal every single day?
At least 5 days a week. I've
5 days a week.
always got mushrooms in my fridge. I'm cooking them up constantly. And a lot of people maybe oh yeah, I'll do a couple of mushrooms or something. I'm doing like 200 grams at a sitting, no problem. I mean, one medium agaricus mushroom is 40 grams. That's about 1.5 ounces, just this one mushroom. So really, you should be cooking up 5-10 agaricus. You throw them into a pan and they will shrink. And just a tip about cooking mushrooms, a lot of people cook them on a low heat, and what happens, all the water comes right out of them, and now they're sitting in a pool of water. They come out as a soggy mess unless you're making a gravy. But
Okay.
you have to use a hot pan. Slice them up to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, not too thin. Throw them into whatever oil that you like. Hot pan, the water stays in them. Brown off both sides of them. They will shrink. They'll shrink to about half what you put them in as, so they'll shrink down. But that's the best way to cook them. I mean, every 5-year-old I've ever talked to said, mushrooms, they're so slimy, I hate them. Well, no wonder, because they're not being cooked properly. So be sure you use a hot pan, or your children will also be complaining.
And if you were that child and you still think, oh, mushrooms are icky, give them another chance, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and look, mushrooms are so versatile. You can put them in anything. You talk about your eggs in the morning, stir fries. I eat mushrooms with every piece of meat that I cook up, and I am a meat eater. So, you can do so many things with them that and the flavor is great, and each different mushroom species. And today we're lucky enough that we have maybe 6 different species in our markets in the US and North America. So you've got oyster mushrooms are very common. You got maitake. In some places you might even have lion's mane, which is really, really delicious. Definitely you have shiitake in the markets. So we're very fortunate today. We have sort of made that first leap away from just one mushroom in the markets.
So takeaway number 1 is eat more mushrooms. And takeaway number 2, at least for me as I process everything you're saying, is maybe experiment with different types of mushrooms and different ways of eating them and with different foods.
Absolutely right. And again, very versatile. And it's just something, and what I would say is this, a couple things too, is look, when you're eating any food for the first time, don't eat too much of it. Sometimes people eat something, then they find out later they're allergic to it. There's 5% of the people out there allergic to almost any food. So take it easy on the first time, try them out, see what you think, and then, move into them later. But again, you can use them in so many different ways. The one other mushroom I really love too is enoki mushroom. Have you ever seen enoki mushrooms?
I don't think so.
They come in a package that's been vacuum packed, and there's like 1,000 of them in there. They have long stems and a tiny, tiny little cap. And they're just really delicious. You pull them out, you strip them all down, throw them in. They're like noodles. They've got this wonderful flavor, and they're like noodles. It's amazing when you see them and how they're grown too. It's like 1,000 of them in this package.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And are those quite common?
Well, over in North America, no. Most of those enoki mushrooms are being brought in from, I believe, Korea is where a lot of them are being brought in from. So they're not really grown very often by very many people in North America. So they're mostly imported, but they're delicious as well.
So worth looking out for and trying for a special evening or a dinner or something.
Absolutely. No, they are fantastic and so interesting. I mean, can you imagine a package and you've got 1,000 mushrooms, and it's not a normal looking thing. It's got a stem that's that long with that tiny little cap on it.
But they're very popular in the Orient.
Oh, are they ever? Yes, absolutely. And in fact, the beauty of mushrooms is that not only are they a good food, but they also have these medicinal qualities. And look, Dave, you must be thinking about, okay, the foundation of our health is diet, right? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
what if the foods that we were getting all of these nutrients from also had these medicinal properties to them, like a lot of vegetables, like the phytochemicals in broccoli and other vegetables. I mean, so mushrooms are giving you not only the nutrients, but also it has this benefit of medicinal properties, and they have been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine. My company primarily is supplying mushrooms in a extract form as supplements. So that is the other side of mushrooms. So you're sort of getting two things in one, and that's what I really love about them. It's food as medicine.
So, okay, so let's jump into that. So again, we have this amazing little, it's a fungus, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we got this amazing little fungus. We're all familiar with it. We've all seen mushrooms out in the forest if you're an outdoors person at all, and you've been in any kind of a damp forest anyway. We don't have so much in Utah, but many other places that get enough water. And we all know what a mushroom looks like. And yet, like I said earlier, if you're wandering through a forest and you see a mushroom, you don't just pick it off of whatever stump you picked it off of and eat it, right? So there's mushrooms that are powerful, in some cases poisonous. In other cases, they have psilocybin that gives people a psychedelic trip, and is being studied currently at Johns Hopkins as a potential treatment for PTSD. And so let's talk about it. First of all, let's talk on the negative side just for a minute. Why do we not pick any old mushroom out of the forest and eat it? How do we avoid the bad guys?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Plants are also poisonous as well. So it's not just mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
The interesting thing about mushrooms is we can go out in the forest and they're free. You can pick them. So,
Right?
so it's in the commons. People can go out and look. Because certain mushrooms are poisonous and people die every year from eating them, no question about it. You do not want to eat any wild mushroom that you haven't had identified by an expert. Absolutely not. And for those of you living in metropolitan areas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, a lot of places, they will have mycological societies, Seattle, Vancouver, where every year people want to go out and hunt for mushrooms and don't know much about it. You can hook up with these mycological societies, go out, and they will teach you, and you can learn maybe one mushroom every year or two that you can identify clearly, and then you can go out and pick mushrooms yourself. But otherwise, never, ever, ever eat a wild mushroom. And look, Dave, most wild mushrooms do not taste good. It's not that they're not edible, but they don't taste good. You know, there's maybe about, I don't know, 25 or 30 that we would call choice edible mushrooms. But the rest of them, you know, you taste one like, oh man, that the flavor's no good. So and there's some that might upset your stomach as well. There are some that will poison you, so you do have to be very careful. But generally speaking, you know, it's a pretty benign grouping of organisms.
Okay, so for the most part, of course, experts like yourself over the centuries, millennia probably, have figured out the right mushrooms to eat and the right mushrooms to leave alone. And so we either join a society, like you said, or we just buy them from the grocery store. And then moving on to the other end of things, we have mushrooms that contain psilocybin. And that's the one I know as a layperson. Probably many people know that, and the commonly known as magic mushrooms out there. There's probably other drugs that come from mushrooms as well.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, just a very quick little lesson in mycology. The kingdom of fungi, which sits between plants and animals. I mean, it's a very large grouping. The actual mushrooms are a small part of it. That can be broken down. This kingdom can be broken down. A couple of divisions are what would be called imperfect fungi and perfect fungi. Imperfect fungi are what we know as molds. So we all know molds, right? Because we've had bread that sat around too long and we look at it and all of a sudden there's something green on it. And we're like, what's that? Well, that's actually one stage of this organism. And to be clear here, how do you grow mushrooms if because mushrooms have no seeds? How do we grow a mushroom? They do not have a seed. Mushrooms have spores. The spores go out, they land on the ground, they land on wood. When conditions are right, that spore will germinate into a very fine filament. Those fine filaments come together, fuse, form a network. That network is called mycelium. Mycelium is the body of this fungus, and it could be imperfect, it could be perfect. The perfect ones, this mycelium will put up a mushroom. So the mycelium is what's called the vegetative body, the mushroom is what's called the fruiting body. Think of it as kind of, there's let's just say an apple tree and the apple. Well, this mycelium is like a tree, but it's underground, you never see it. So a lot of people, when they're out wandering around and they go, oh my, look at that mushroom there. Where did that come from? Where did it come from? Under the ground is this network of mycelium that has been building up reserves of energy. And when conditions are right, it'll put up this mushroom. So, and one of the things that's happening here is those molds, which you hear people talking about, and it's like, oh, my house has got mold in it, or I've got a problem with mold. The issue with molds is that they'll grow in damp places, maybe back in your damp bedroom that doesn't have enough airflow and things, and the molds will produce spores. The issue with molds, for the most part now, are the fact that you're breathing in those spores and people become allergic to those spores. And that's why you have these, what people are talking about when they have mold issues. Now, remember this, a mold is what produced penicillin. So a fungal mold, that's where penicillin comes in. So again, we've got benefits there, and also there's these detrimental qualities to the spores that mold produces. But with a perfect fungus, which is what these mushrooms are, up comes a mushroom, a fruiting body, which a mold does not. It's always in that vegetative form. It does not come up with a mushroom. So a mushroom is actually one of these perfect forms, and that's what we see normally. We never see the vegetative body underground. And to be clear about that as well, that mycelium, that vegetative body, is breaking down organic matter. Think of all the organic matter that falls to the ground every year: leaves, annual plants, branches of trees. What are we going to do with all that unless we have microorganisms that are repurposing that? And that's one of the beauties about mushrooms and mushroom growing, is that we use waste products to grow mushrooms. They're grown on agricultural waste. The agaricus is grown on straw. That's what agaricus is grown on. All of our medicinal mushrooms mostly are grown on waste wood, like sawdust. We're repurposing all of that organic matter into a good food. And when you're finished, you've got this sawdust or straw broken down to where now they're putting it back onto a field as a fertilizer. It's an amazing cycle.
That's very, very cool. And so from all that, the different types of mushrooms are developing different types of medicinal properties. I mentioned psilocybin. What are some of the others that we're getting out of these mushrooms?
Well, for example, the products that we sell, which we call medicinal or functional mushrooms, again, one of the things they share and have in common are these beta glucans. And that's, when I think about mushrooms, I think about them, especially on the supplement side of things. When you're taking those, what you're doing is you're helping to potentiate your immune system. It's almost like taking a vitamin. When you're taking a mushroom supplement, it's not like the next day you're going, oh man, I feel so good because I've been taking that mushroom supplement. No, that's not how it works. How it works is it's sitting in the background, and these beta glucans, what they do is we have actually receptor sites in our intestines that are specific to beta glucans. So the beta glucans, you're eating the mushrooms, you're taking the supplements, they will contact those receptor sites, and then when necessary, they will stimulate the production of immune cells like macrophages or T cells or NK cells, and help you to cope with different types of diseases. So they are there in the background working for you.
And again, you've mentioned for the most part immune response. Is that the main benefit? Is building up our immune system, which of course when our immune system's strong, we're less likely to get illness.
Get a lot of things. Absolutely. No, they have other benefits. For example, there's a mushroom out there that's really our number one seller right now, and everybody loves this. It's called lion's mane. And lion's mane actually has compounds in it that stimulate what's called nerve growth factor. We produce nerve growth factor, and what it does, it helps to organize our neurons. And as we get older, we don't manufacture that much nerve growth factor. Lion's mane will stimulate the production of nerve growth factor. And what's happening there is that it has shown and demonstrated some effects on memory and cognition. And are you familiar at all with the category called nootropics?
I am, yeah.
Well, it's become sort of the darling of the nootropics arena right now. So everybody kind of wants anything that can help with their, let's just say, benefit their productivity or cognitive abilities. So lion's mane actually is being used for that. Now, they've done some studies that have shown that it does help with memory. They're actually looking at it as possibly used for dementia. And that's something that we'll see down the line, because you know what happens with in looking for benefits with any particular plant. What they do is they will fractionate it into many, many different compounds, and they do what's considered to be drug discovery. What compound can we find in there that is active against or works in a certain way? They're looking for those kind of things. So lion's mane has these compounds, and whether or not they'll ultimately refine those and on a drug type of discovery or not, I don't know, but just eating lion's mane mushrooms seems to have some benefits in that way. Another mushroom that a lot of people are using for fatigue and energy is called cordyceps. Have you heard of cordyceps at all?
I have. As a matter of fact, I have mushroom teas. And there's some are for energy and some are for calming, and they have all these different benefits that they say. And cordyceps is mentioned on one of the teas. I'm trying to remember the company. It was on the Tim Ferriss show, I think, that I heard them.
Four Sigmatic.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of their teas in my pantry.
Yeah, well, you know, and I know the people at Four Sigmatic. I like the company. What they've done is they've got mushrooms and they've got different herbs that they've bundled them with to make them the flavor in different flavors of different types, and but cordyceps is called caterpillar fungus, and traditionally it was harvested up in the foothills of Tibet, and it literally, a caterpillar hibernates over winter, but while it's there, cordyceps spores germinate, take it over. The caterpillar never wakes up, and instead a little tiny fungus grows out of it. And you have to get down on your hands and knees to harvest it. And so they've been wildcrafting this for a long time. Today, it's the most expensive herb in the world. It's $15,000 for a dried kilogram of this. And what it looks like, it looks like an actual caterpillar, because that's part of the product they sell, with this little black thing that is growing out of it that looks like, they call it winter worm, summer grass. Now, we don't sell that. I actually tried to introduce it into the supplement space about 30 years ago, and I had companies say, you know what, our customers are not going to eat caterpillars. I'm sorry. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. They're probably vegetarian too, right? And caterpillar meat doesn't quite cut it. But we cultivate cordyceps now. No caterpillars or insects involved, and it has been used for fatigue. People who are coming out of a long illness, they can't quite make the final leap to health. They give them cordyceps. Also seems to be good for oxygen utilization. You know, one of the ways they test something for fatigue, Dave, it's a really interesting test. I mean, okay.
I don't.
It's called the mouse swimming test.
Okay.
So they have a pool. They give a certain mouse a certain amount of cordyceps, give them some time. They give another one none, the control. They'll put the control in. The control swims around. They time it. Okay, how long did it last before it stopped swimming? Of course, they take it out. They didn't harm it. Then they put the cordyceps mouse in, see how long it swims.
Okay.
And does it swim longer? Well, that's one of the methods used to test any herbal product or any product for fatigue.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's basically an animal study. So and you know, there are in vitro studies which are done in test tubes and petri plates and that kind of thing, and then there are in vivo studies which are done with mostly mice and so forth. And then, of course, there's human clinical trials. Human clinical trials are much more difficult and very expensive. So in the herbal markets, you don't get a lot of clinical trials. But cordyceps, again, has been used for fatigue. And so most of the companies that purchase it from us, they're putting it into athletic products and things like that. Is there that benefit? I'm not really sure. I don't really know. I don't get a lot of feedback from my customers. Maybe it's helping, maybe it's not. The key thing with a supplement, in my opinion, is to be sure and take enough of it, because so many supplements in the market, you know what? Every bottle you buy is like 60 capsules usually, and they say take 2 a day. Why is that? Well, it's a month's supply, and they say take 2. Well, if you're a 120-pound person or a 200-pound person, how does that make any sense? It doesn't make sense at all, right? So you really have to look at supplements from that vantage point, and I would say they're mostly always underpowered. So this is something where you have to be aware of that, because you know, in traditional Chinese medicine, and you go to the physician and he prescribes you an herbal formula, and you take it home, you boil it up, and it's like, oh my God, that's awful. But the fact is, it is strong, and he wants to see something happen. He doesn't want to give you something where it's almost like a placebo and you're not getting an effect to it. He wants something to happen. He's giving you a strong dose of it. I've had a medical practitioner talk about reishi and say, I give at least 30 dried grams of reishi mushroom to my patients for the liver. And that's something about reishi mushroom. Are you familiar with the reishi mushroom?
A little bit.
Oh, man, have you ever seen it? It is beautiful. It's got this red cap. It's shaped like a ram's horn, this beautiful spiraled cap. Amazing mushroom. It's a polypore. It's like wood. It's when you dry it out, it's like wood. You don't eat reishi mushroom. It's like wood. I mean, we have those mushrooms here. They grow off the side of trees, called bracket fungi. But when I was first introducing reishi to the market, I'd take it around to people at a trade show, and I'd say, hey, have you ever heard of reishi mushroom? They go, no. Oh, check it out. And they look at it and go, is this for real? It's like, well, it looks like maybe somebody carved it. It's just woody. It's hard. You could slam it. It's hard.
Well, wait, before you finish on the reishi, let me just cut you off, and hopefully you can maintain your train of thought, because I want to go back to the cordyceps. Now, are you putting this in a supplement?
Yes, absolutely. We have a cordyceps supplement. Yes.
You have a bottle sitting there somewhere, or similar?
Not right here, no.
Okay, what's your website?
Nammex.com, or if you want to see a retail product, go to realmushrooms.com. Cordyceps is there.
And Nammex is Nammex.
That's right.
Okay, so one of the things that your company is making is a product that has the cordyceps, which you have told us could have potentially some really great benefit.
Yes.
Now you're talking about the reishi, and what kind of, but it's not edible.
No, but normally, traditionally, what they did with reishi is they made it into a tea. You know, and traditional Chinese medicine, everything is made into a tea. What is a tea?
Okay.
A tea is a water extract. So, and the tea, the beauty of a tea is you drink it, it's very fast acting. So a tea is a very good, let's just say, delivery system for herbal products. Now, reishi, it's bitter. So reishi, if you're cooking it into a tea or something like that, you're just going, "Oh my God, this tastes so bad." Well, we're not
Okay.
used to bitters in North America, right? We want something to be sweet.
Right.
Um, but I put reishi into my coffee in the morning. I
Okay.
drink my coffee black. I like coffee, so I put reishi in there. It adds another bitter note. Reishi, and this is really interesting, we do beta glucan testing on all of our products as part of our quality control. So we can tell you the level of beta glucans in every single one of our products. It turns out that the two mushrooms that are highest in beta glucan are reishi and turkey tail.
Okay.
It's so interesting because those are the two that are really kind of thought of as the top immunomodulators. So, and here it is. We've kind of demonstrated that they have the highest level of beta glucan. So it kind of makes sense. Reishi has these triterpenoids, which are very good for our liver. And that's one of the primary uses for reishi. And so what makes reishi different from all the others is all the others have these beta glucans. Reishi has these triterpenoids, so it's kind of got that extra component to it that the others don't. That's why reishi in Asia is called the king of mushrooms. It's really interesting.
And what format are you delivering these? Is it extracts? What is it that you're making?
We make extracts, but they're powdered extracts.
Powdered
Yeah,
extracts.
so think about it in terms of you cook something up, like let's just say you're making a soup. You throw all sorts of stuff into the soup. You kind of put it on simmer. You simmer it for hours. Then you remove all of the fiber because you're like, okay, I've gotten everything out of it. Now, if you wanted to make an extract, what you do is you kind of like boil off the water, get it down to like a syrup, and then you'd have a really strong extract. We take that extract at that point in time and we send it to what's called a spray dryer that turns it into a very fine powder. So we sell powders to companies that put out our powders in capsules, bottles. We have a retail division that does the same. We also sell it in a pouch, just a straight powder for people that want to put it into a smoothie or something like that. So no, we sell
Okay.
extract powders.
Extract powders, and people can buy these direct from you, or you're just a wholesaler selling them to supplement companies who make stuff out of them.
Nammex is a wholesaler. Real Mushrooms is our retail side. And so people want to get our products, they can go to realmushrooms.com, and that's where we sell them online only to the retail market.
Okay, realmushrooms.com. Wonderful. And how many different extracts have you got for sale at realmushrooms.com?
I believe we have 8 or 9 different products. Something we have right now that's really kind of cool is we've come out with a mushroom chocolate and also a mushroom cocoa. And mushroom chocolate is nothing unique. We have customers. Dave, you can't imagine all of the innovative ways that people are using mushrooms these days in all sorts of beverages. Have you noticed all the great beverages that are out there now? Not so much these sugary drinks, but now we've got such a lineup of amazing drinks that have got herbs in them and medicinal herbs and mushrooms. It's just so cool. I mean, I just think the innovations that are going along right now, and also just the different kind of food products that they're putting our mushrooms into, like chocolate of all things. It's really interesting.
How else are end users using your extracts?
End users, well, I mean, for the most part, I would say most people that are buying, consumers that are buying them are either putting them into a smoothie, or they're just taking them by capsules, doing that. But I really believe, like, some of these mushrooms have secondary benefits, like we talked about cordyceps, like we talked about lion's mane and the reishi triterpenes for the liver. But I look at mushrooms as something that provides a level of insurance to your state of immunity. And look, when COVID hit, my God, I mean, our business in the last 2 years has just gone crazy, regardless of COVID. But when COVID hit, we had some retail products sell out within a week. It was just phenomenal, the spike we got out of that, because everybody is interested in having a stronger immune system to resist these kind of things. I mean, look, we've resisted colds and flus for a long time with our immune system. So if you can potentiate that even more. Now, look, at the same time, let's face it, you've got to have a good diet. You've got to have a reasonably healthy lifestyle. Mushrooms are not a silver bullet. Don't ever think that. And look, some companies out there will hype mushrooms as being panaceas. They'll hype them for, oh, they're good for cancer and all these things. Look, please do not think that way about functional mushrooms. That's not really the way to think about them at all. They're something that can definitely benefit you, but you have to put them into your diet. You have to be using them in a regular way to get the benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like how you use the word functional, because medicine conjures up, I have this symptom, so give me a medicine. So I have this symptom, I take this medicine, now I feel better. And you yourself do use the word medicinal, but you're using it, and this is just me trying to clarify what you're doing here, but it seems like you're using it in a proactive way. You're not saying, wait till you get sick and then take a bunch of mushrooms. You're saying if you're, so your approach when you say medicinal mushrooms is preventive, not treating symptoms.
Absolutely right. And we're kind of moving away from the term medicinal. They've been considered medicinal mushrooms forever. Now I think it's much better. Functional is a much better word. Medicinal is too much like medicine. We don't want it to be looked upon that way. So we're using functional mushrooms a lot more these days. Okay. And I think it's much more appropriate.
Well, I don't want to get slightly political here, but there are certainly organizations that want to own anything to do with medicinal or healing or any of those words that you start using. You know, we have the American Medical Association, the AMA, which I'm a fan of. If I get in a car wreck, I want a doctor from the AMA to put my body back together. Right?
I agree.
But it does get a little difficult when they want to control every word and every aspect of healing and of health. When there's a sickness business and there's a wellness business.
I totally agree. And I think you and I would agree that we are more in the wellness business. We're looking at people in a more holistic way. And I think there are practitioners now that are starting to do that also. You know, look, big pharma, let's face it, they sell pills and medicine. And you know, when you look out there at all the pharmaceuticals that people are taking, and I'm just like, I don't take any pharmaceuticals and you know, I have a lot of friends in my peer group that are taking multiple drugs. I really avoid that 100%. I don't want to get on that train unless it was absolutely necessary. And I really believe in diet. I believe in supplementation. I believe in exercise. I believe I live in a place where I can get out. I've got fresh air here. Right. I've got clean water. This is so important for good health. I mean, I'm sure in Utah you've got the same. You've got places in there that are quite clean and fresh air and so on.
We do. Well, actually, unfortunately, in my valley, we struggle with bad air quality. I have air purifier on each floor of my home, and we do have to concern ourselves with air quality. We actually have to pay attention to the air quality index on certain days because right now we're getting all the smoke from the fires in California.
Oh my.
And it doesn't pass the mountains a few miles out here to my right. And we get what's called inversions.
Yes, of course.
Where the pollution stays in the valley. So other than that, you know, we do have to be aware of air quality. But I live by a farmland, and my dog and I walk every day. And everything you said, diet, supplementation, exercise, the outdoors, meditation and mindfulness is an important part of my regimen. And,
yes,
and of course, and I'm like you. And I've got a buddy. He graduated about the same time as you, probably a similar age. That every time he goes to the doctor and the nurse is filling out the form, says, okay, what medications are you on? He says, none. He says, no. I need to know. And he's like, and he tells me every year, he's like, Dave, it drives me nuts. They literally don't believe me that a 67-year-old man isn't on medication. And it's like shocking to them. They think you're lying.
Yeah.
And I think that's so sad that we've come to that in our society.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been in kind of a natural community and a natural way of living my whole life, and I don't want to change that. And certainly, a pharmaceutical for me is really a major change in things. So right. The fact that I don't have to take any, or I am not taking any right now. I mean, the most I ever take, I occasionally will take an IBU if I have a headache. I take one, like 200 milligrams, and that's about it, or an aspirin or something like that. I mean, otherwise I just don't do it. I mean, I don't need it, and I don't do it. And again, it's just a lifestyle.
And to be clear, again, to everyone listening, we've gone on quite a while here. And in the beginning, I said, we're not giving medical advice. We're not telling you, listener, to stop taking a medication you've been prescribed. And we're also not saying that there are no medications that anyone should ever be on, or off. I don't know. I got my wording there a little fuzzy, but you get the idea. There are certain prescriptions absolutely a person should probably be on, but we're not advising. We're just giving you our own perspectives and choices that we're making, and that we're trying to avoid taking drugs proactively by being healthy. That's the message we're trying to share. So I just want to clarify that. And Jeff, I've kept you a long time, but I appreciate it. It's been very fascinating. There's been tons of nuggets. And as the king of mushrooms, as I have now crowned you, what are your closing thoughts to those listening on mushrooms?
Well, I always promote and tell people, put mushrooms into your diet. If you're not eating mushrooms right now, you're really missing out. There are actually studies out there where they have people fill out these forms on their diet, and it turns out the people who eat mushrooms live longer in all of these studies. It's just, more and more the evidence is mounting up. So please put mushrooms into your diet. If you want to go one further, if you feel like you need it, then go ahead and try mushrooms as a supplement as well. But put mushrooms into your diet first. It's I call it the forgotten food and the missing dietary link.
I love it. And your website again is?
Nammex.com. We have a lot of great educational material there for you, slideshows on how we grow our mushrooms. And then we've also got a lot of good information at realmushrooms.com.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been very interesting and a real pleasure.
Dave, thank you. It has been a pleasure. Great to talk to you.
Okay, and to those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.